Hi, we're Nia and Marianne from Seren Health Coaching. We are metabolic health coaches who are passionate about good metabolic health for everyone. We also love to chat about all things health and to share as much information as we can with people who want to make changes to their lifestyle but aren't quite sure where to start. We're going to release a new episode every Friday where we talk about a different aspect of health. So do subscribe and let us know what you think. We'd also love to know what you're interested in too. So if there's something that you'd like us to have a chat about, do send us a message and we'll do our best to cover it soon.
Hi, Nia.
Hello.
Today we're going to talk about something that's recently blown my mind.
Ooh.
And it's about exercise and how it fits into energy requirements. I've read a book called Burn
Mm.
by Herman Ponzer, and it's the misunderstood science of metabolism. Now you can't believe everything you read, but it's really blown my mind about this sort of physics of energy in, energy out. So
Yeah.
what I was going to pose to you is the
Mm.
question: do you think you can outrun obesity?
You see, so I've always gone with that phrase, you can't outrun a bad diet. Because I
Right.
do think that exercise has its place, absolutely,
Yeah.
but that it just eating whatever you want and doing as much exercise as you can isn't going to cut it. Is that correct?
Well, it's very complicated. So if you think about people on the Tour de France, they ride in
Yeah.
excessive amounts every day and they're using huge amounts of calories, which they can't replace. So they
Okay.
often lose weight in the short term
Yeah.
because basically they're in enormous deficit. But
Yeah.
we often get people asking about if they do exercise, does that mean they can have extra
For calories.
intake? So
So
people
so
are
they're trying
often
to say they want to
yeah.
be in that kind of deficit. But to be fair, you'd have to do an
Well,
awful
the
lot of
more
exercise to be in
deficit
that
they
kind of
are in,
deficit.
no, nobody wants to be in that. So
I
that's
don't want to run I
that
don't want to cycle the Tour de France.
that's the sharp end. So we're talking about ultra sort of sports and
Ultra sport, yeah.
and they're a different category, obviously. But
Yes.
in your mind, you often think that if you're exercising more and therefore using more energy,
Mm.
that it'll be easier for you to go into a deficit of energy, because if you're putting the same energy in and you're
Yeah.
walking your kids to school and not going in the car, do you get
Then
a
you must
plus
lose
off
weight.
this?
Yes. I think loads of people think that, especially since, and I haven't been for years, obviously, but the gym machines tell you how many calories you've burnt,
Yes, that.
but
So
that's
you're
not
thinking
accurate,
about the
is it?
Kit Kat while you're on that machine, aren't you? You're
Yeah,
thinking about the
definitely.
vending machine outside the gym, and you're thinking,
Mm-hmm.
oh, lo and behold, if I did 500 calories here, which is actually quite a lot in a gym, I'm
Mm.
really going to enjoy my smoothie with a Kit Kat. So what we've got is news that maybe this isn't how it works. But I think what's blown my mind is some of the science behind this, because it's
Mm.
very, very complicated. But
Oh,
let's,
good.
before we dis-exercise and say you might as well sit on a couch,
No, no, no,
um,
no. We don't believe that either.
I think there's some fabulous things about exercise.
Yeah.
What's the best thing for you about exercise? Why do
Oh,
you
is
exercise?
why do I exercise? I do it for two reasons. Firstly, because when I've done it, I feel really good. So the
Yeah.
endorphins definitely are a big thing.
Okay.
If you've woken up and you're a bit grumpy, actually doing
Yeah.
some exercise does make you feel a lot better about the world and yourself.
Okay.
And the
Okay.
second reason why I exercise is because I like to be strong. So I see
Okay.
the effects of doing the exercise. I see, more muscle definition, and I like that. Is that okay?
And you are at the age where you're beginning the slide. So let's just say
Oh,
that
thanks.
the slide in terms of naturally
Losing
losing
muscle
some of
mass.
your muscle mass. So,
It's all up from
and
here.
kids have the highest metabolic rate, by the way, and they also have the highest sort of ratio of lean muscle mass
Yeah.
to fat mass. As you get to about 20, it all sort of stabilizes. And between 20 and 60, in fact, your basal metabolic rate, or whatever you want to call it, is pretty stable. So all
Mhm.
this business of middle-age stuff is actually not based particularly on science. It'll start decreasing in your 30s, by the way. By the end of your 30s, you'll definitely notice some, and the menopause
Oh.
accelerates some of that muscle mass loss because of the hormonal. You don't
Yeah.
have to, but you will naturally lose. You will never be as strong unless you do an enormous amount of work, and I'm not even sure then you will, because there are a lot of
Mm.
things at work. Okay, so
Okay.
the good things about, and never chuck exercise out of your life. So the good things are, as you say, stress reliever. It's keeping that lean muscle mass
Mhm.
in check. And by the way, the ratio of fat to the muscle mass, of course, is
Yeah.
part of your engine. So
Yeah.
how you use your fuel is incredibly important in the long run of
Yeah.
keeping a healthy body. So don't give up exercise.
I
Uh,
promise.
and things like, as you get to my age, the functional possibilities as you age,
Mm.
if you're prepared to put in the work, the rewards are huge. So
Yeah.
the fact is, you're going to live more independently. You're less likely to fall. There's all sorts of pluses at my age. I could sell you exercise, I'll tell you in a minute.
Ooh.
So don't give up the exercise. But what did I learn that blew my mind? Well,
Mhm. Yes.
our metabolic engines are very complicated, and they're also dynamic and adaptive, and they products of evolution, if you see it like that. So you
Mhm.
know, the life we lead is actually it's
Not the life
quite
we were
it hasn't
intending
been
to live.
around very long.
No.
It wasn't very long ago, even in our world,
Yeah.
that industrialization changed a lot of our world. But
Mm.
pre-industrialization, most people, remember, didn't have cars. Most people did manual jobs. All of those
Yeah.
things. We are living in a very sedentary age
Yeah.
with a lot of probably more stress because we have more complex lifestyles. There's
Yeah.
all sorts of bits to this.
It's interesting, isn't it?
Um,
Because they said the advent of technology would make our
yeah,
lives so that we would actually
yeah,
have more leisure time. And
yes.
actually,
Oh
it's turned
dear.
out that technology has ruled our lives and made us work more, um, and
Yeah,
made us sit down more.
it's not as it seems. So Herman Ponzer is an evolutionary anthropologist, and
Ooh.
he started looking at the hunter-gatherer tribe called the Hansa tribe, which have been studied a lot. But what he was looking at, he was measuring their basal metabolic rates with the idea of explaining why and how their rates differ from sedentary developed world workers. So somebody at a computer screen most of the day. Now, these
Okay.
guys, the hunter gatherers, they walk about 10 miles a day. They don't necessarily run, other
No.
than when they're going up a tree from the lion. But generally
Mm.
speaking, they are walking a lot, and they hunt. So they have
Yeah.
little bits of hit. And he
Okay.
expected them to have very high
Calorie
metabolic
burn.
rates.
Okay.
Exactly.
And you
Um,
can kind of understand that, can't you? Because
yeah,
as you said,
that
they're
would make
walking a
sense to
lot.
me. Yeah,
They're very active, so they
yeah,
don't sit down very much. They are, as you said, interspersed with these periods of running or climbing to catch their prey. Um, and so therefore somebody who's walking around all day long should therefore,
yeah.
in
You would
in
expect
common
them
sense,
to,
burn more calories than
yeah.
somebody who is sitting at their desk, moving their fingers and occasionally getting up to go to the toilet or get a new
And
coffee.
I get the feeling I'm going to tell you that it's not so. This is the thing. They
Yes.
went to measure them with the idea that they would get that as the answer, but lo and behold, on studying the data, they realized something very odd. Now, there are things about metabolic rates, lean muscle mass we've talked about, so the ratio
Yeah.
to fat mass. So, fat cells use less energy, by the way, and that
Mhm.
sort of explains that. And men have higher lean muscle mass than women just by design,
Yeah, because they
for
have.
evolutionary
Yeah,
reasons,
and they're
reproduction.
often
So
bigger than women,
and
and
so
yeah, there's
bigger
so many
people will
things.
have higher rates as well.
Yeah,
Yeah,
and they've
exactly.
got
So
more
those
testosterone, men, and that increases.
exactly. So
Yeah.
all of that comes into this very complicated sum. But when they did
Yes.
the sums, what they got was the fact that with that your calorie requirement, your energy requirements, let's call it, was in
Mm-hmm.
quite a small band, actually. Whether you were in Chicago at a computer all day, or whether you were walking around digging up tubers and shooting deer.
Hmm.
And
Well,
this
that's
was
a bit of a
really
bummer, isn't it?
surprising, really surprising.
Question. So, all these people now that have said, "Oh, this is what I'll do. I'll get a walking desk and walk on their treadmills to try and
Ah,
recreate
well,
this."
you see, walking desks have their uses because remember we started off with the good things about exercise.
Oh,
So there's
okay.
still those still stand. So
Okay.
the walking desk will still be really useful to you in many ways. But what I'm saying is you can't necessarily use energy activity levels as a
Mm,
weight management tool.
yeah.
Now, the heads are all lean, and generally there is not much obesity. There's also not much chronic disease.
Yeah.
By the way, they don't necessarily live longer because they don't also have, they have problems with infections and other things. So
And they
we're
might
not
get
talking
killed
about
by a lion.
longevity. Yeah, exactly.
So, you could always
But
put it into perspective.
and one way of looking at why this sort of goes wrong in our thoughts is that it's sort of about displacement. So
Okay.
you have fuel going in, and I sort of think when I'm walking, I'm always thinking, well, I'm using all my energy now in activity, but I'm not. I have an
No.
immune system that requires a lot of energy. I have cells all over my body that require energy, and they're not all about activity level. So,
No.
activity is only one little bit of the puzzle. But I think when we think about energy in, we're very focused on energy out as an exercise
Yeah.
quotient
Mm.
rather than the fact that you've got an immune system that needs a lot of energy, you have a reproductive system that needs a lot of energy. And in evolutionary terms, remember, you're set up actually to reproduce because
Mm.
that's part of how we survive. So your body is pretty adaptive at sorting out the energy you'll use for activity.
When you think
So
about it, this is almost like a protective mechanism, isn't it? Because
it is.
obviously, you need certain things to function. You need to
Yeah.
be able to reproduce. You need to protect your immunity. You need to be able to think because our brain uses a huge amount of energy as well.
Yeah.
So if suddenly all of those things went into a huge deficit when we ran round the block, that would be a huge problem for us.
Exactly. And so this explains a little bit why, if you're, for instance, an endurance athlete or an elite athlete who does an awful lot of training, this is
Mm,
not what your body was necessarily adapted for.
to do, yeah,
You find that they often suffer from problems with fertility and with immune system issues. Um,
because actually
and
they've
that
taken
sort of
away those.
explains,
Yes,
yeah, that
yeah,
basically you're working in a deficit that isn't particularly good for you. Your
yes.
metabolism is incredibly flexible and it adapts over time to the activity levels that you require of it. So those
Mm,
Hadza people are eating almost the same amount of energy as the guy in Chicago, but they have adapted mechanisms that
mm,
are using their energy in different places and keeping all the main functions going. But I think
yeah.
this is not what
Not what we were
researchers
told.
expected,
No.
and it was a
I
real
th
surprise for them.
Yeah.
And
When you first learn about calories, and that
yes,
isn't as easy as we were led to believe either. The way that I learnt in science was, you burnt a peanut over a Bunsen burner, and the length of time that
yeah,
you burnt that
yeah,
nut was
yeah,
equivalent to the energy that it contained. Therefore, that's how you work out how many calories is, well, it was done with kilojoules and then into calories, wasn't it? But it's just very fascinating because, of course, the way that our body actually burns
yes.
that energy for fuel is completely different. Um,
It's very different to how we imagine because I don't think
yeah,
I imagined all the cells working in these cogs and requiring energy. I just imagined the activity levels was the sort of
sort of, yeah, the
need for
source.
your fuel, but of course
Yeah,
it's not like that. I mean, using fuel all night, you're using
yeah.
fuel, as you say, your brain's using fuel. So I think what's blown my mind is it's given me a slightly different perspective
Mm.
on the fact that it's incredibly useful to exercise in all sorts of both physiological and psychological ways.
Yeah,
And strength training as you age is definitely something
really
to want to
important.
put in your life. But I would say that if you're using your activity levels as a way of needing to then eat more energy,
Calories.
it's
Yeah.
not going to work because it
So
doesn't
the
work
yeah.
like that.
So the really simple takeaway from this is that what we've been told, or what we have kind of
Hmm.
decided to believe, which is that if we're just in an energy deficit and we
Yeah.
exercise a bit more, then we can have the Mars bar, is complete nonsense. And
Yeah.
actually, we need to get away from this type of thinking. We need to think of exercise as a really useful tool to have in the box, great for your bone strength, your muscle strength, your mobility, and your
So
flexibility as you
much.
age.
So much.
Wonderful for your endorphin release, for your
Yeah.
mental health. A fantastic thing to do just to keep your body in the top tip condition that you want to keep it in. But it is not as simple as I ran around the block, now I can have a Mars bar. And I think
So
many
the
people
way
believe
the
that is the case.
in the short term, of course, it would work. So if
Of
you started
course.
walking 20 miles a day and you
Ooh,
didn't feel differently, you would
yeah,
lose weight. But in
yeah,
the long term, your body would adapt to that activity level, and you
yeah.
would find that the deficit wasn't quite the same. So that's the interesting bit to me. I've definitely learned something that I didn't know I didn't know. So a
Always useful.
fascinating read.
Mm,
Now, it's a bit, like the pendulum swings of all these sort of discoveries, but it gives you another perspective. So the law of physics, he ends by saying the law of physics is still there
mm,
about energy in, energy out. It's how you're using that energy that isn't quite as you thought,
yeah.
and not as they thought either. So
No, no,
interesting.
absolutely. I think that's why we as well are so interested in not just restricting your calories, not just going overboard
No.
on the exercise, thinking about all the little things that make up your health overall, rather than just um, eat
Yeah,
less
the
and
take.
move more, which I think has been the big takeaway for
Yeah.
many years.
The takeaway is it's much more complicated than that, and you have a
Yeah,
very adaptive metabolism in the long term. And by the way, you have some incredibly good defense mechanisms
mechanisms.
against losing weight. So
Mm,
all of this has to be taken into account. It's very complicated, but don't think you'll outrun obesity.
bad
It's
diet.
not that simple.
Absolutely. Well, thank you very much. I would you send me the book when you've read it so I can have a read
I
myself?
think I think it's worth a read for
Yeah.
sure.
Yeah. I do think it's always fascinating, isn't it, to read more and to learn more, because when it comes to our health, we don't have all the answers and we are
No,
still
no,
learning.
we're on
Um,
a trajectory of learning. I learn something every
and it's
day,
good to know that what we've believed for a long time can be disproved, um, because it means
and
that
there'll
we're
be more beyond
constantly,
this.
oh yeah, of
Mm.
course, we don't know what we don't know yet, so there'll be more to learn.
No,
But
there'll
yeah,
be more
fascinating.
beyond this. I just think it's worth knowing that you can't replace that energy you're using in the gym with a
Mm,
smoothie on the way out, because it doesn't work like that. And
it doesn't
we've
work like that.
often been asked that in our various roles, haven't we?
Yeah,
That if I do more exercise, can I eat more? Well, no.
no. Sorry. It's quite depressing, isn't it?
It is
What
a
a way
bit.
to end. No, sorry, you can't.
It doesn't work like that. It's just not that simple. Whoever made us very
Shame.
complicated. Lovely to
Shame.
see you, Nia.
And
Talk
you, I'll
soon.
speak to you soon. Bye.
Bye for now.